Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I'll tell you what, when I think about words that we throw around a lot in the world of business and entrepreneurship and just society at large, sustainability is one of those words, because there's a lot of ways that we talk about sustainability. We talk about it in terms of the environment, we talk about it in terms of our habits, what's sustainable, and it's important for all of us in our businesses and our operations and our teams and our growth to make sure that we're always doing things that are sustainable, that they are here for a long time. And today's guest is incredible at what she does when it comes to all things sustainability. She's one of us. She's a fellow entrepreneur making positive changes in the world. So let me tell you all about her. Her name is Susan Spencer. Susan is the co-founder of a boutique sustainability consulting firm. The scope of all the potential and current clients' sustainability needs, often they approach with specific needs such as help with a certain ESG or climate-related questionnaire, assistance with developing a sustainability plan, or even a sustainable procurement program. Yes, because this stuff touches all different aspects of our businesses and of our lives. Susan is a learning designer and consultant who's focused on guiding organizations towards implementing improved, sustainable management practices across the pillars of people, places, and profit. Three things that touch all of our businesses. She's also a former college instructor, so you'll see how much learning shows up in the work that she does. She's a former fashion industry executive and a published author. We're going to learn a lot. Susan has such a great perspective on all these things, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Susan Spencer. All right, Susan, I'm so excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm happy to be here.
Heck yes, and you heard, I tease listeners just a little bit about your background, but take us beyond the bio. Who's Susan? How'd you start doing all these amazing things that you're up to?
Yeah, well, as you said earlier, I worked in the fashion industry in the last century. And I was working in New York, started as a buyer, moved into wholesale, was a brand representative, account executive, worked in marketing. And then I kind of found my sweet spot when I was asked to move into training people and going out to the stores and making sure that our employees knew what they were doing. It was a brand management position, but it was really largely training and then communicating the information I would learn in the stores back to, at the time it was an Italian company, our Italian merchandising team. So I made a lot of impact with not only the store employees and our sales, but also with the way our product line was being formed and shaped. And from there, I moved back to Southern California, where I'm from, and we had a family. And I started teaching part-time at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in Los Angeles. And I thought, this is just part-time. I'm just doing this just for a bit. And I just love teaching. So it kind of dovetailed back to the training that I had done in the industry and just helping people, talking to people. It was so much fun, like telling the war stories of the fashion industry to these students. They loved it. And, from there, I thought, you know what? I would like to actually take my learning to a larger venue. So aside from just, the college that I was teaching at, I decided to get a master's in learning design, or instructional design as they call it. And that master's led me to doing corporate learning design. And my first client I was subcontracting was with Facebook. And it was during the pandemic. And I remember thinking, I am the biggest fraud. How is this even happening? Facebook is talking to me and I have no idea what I'm doing. But I pulled through and did a number of other projects with that particular learning agency. And after that, I started my own. And one of my clients is a carbon accounting platform called Good Lab. And I started creating basically all of their sustainability related and environmentally specifically related programs both, webinars as well as their e-learning. And that's when I realized I can put my knowledge toward good, toward being a force of good in the world, and sharing what is going on in the world with a much larger group of people.
Yeah, Susan, I really appreciate that overview, because I feel like just in that one answer you shared with us the intersection of so many different past experiences that you've had, and also so many passions. And it was hard for me in the intro, but I feel like I touched on so many of them. It was hard to show that sustainability, these topics touch so many different aspects. Just in that answer, you talked about teaching, and obviously education is a part of that. You talked about business. You talked about sustainability with regards to the environment. Obviously, your clients are a prime example of exactly that. So talk to us about where along the way you were just like, no, entrepreneurship is the vehicle where I can start doing this, because you've had so many cool career arcs and stories, but where along the way did you decide, I'm going to do this and I'm going to serve even more people?
Yeah. Well, I have to give a big call out. I had my own learning agency. I still do. It's called Sandbox Learning Experience Design. And primarily I work with companies and not-for-profits in the environmental scope. But I have to give a big call out to my friend and colleague, Patricia Littlefield, who is a former VP of Sustainability at a Los Angeles area apparel company. And during the pandemic, things were, as you can imagine, crazy in that business. Anyone who is living in this area remembers all the transportation freight ships that were lined up for miles from the port of Los Angeles almost to San Diego. So it was a huge disruption, and she was looking to kind of move away from the corporate world and the fashion industry in general. So she said to me, hey, with your training background, which is really, really needed in this industry, and my knowledge of, policies and human rights and, environmental topics, why don't we band together and start a company, a sustainability company, for consulting, mostly for fashion? And I said, sounds great. So I started a second business with her, and the firm is called EcoVadis. And we have now probably worked with about 15 clients in 2.5 short years. And we started with the fashion industry, but quickly learned that there was a lot of opportunity and that our services were needed absolutely everywhere. So from there, we've worked with everyone from, like big steel to today. I just had a meeting with a large industrial construction company, to smaller construction companies, to people who make test sets for the government. It's been crazy. We worked with Canadian companies, Mexican companies, American companies. I have a client in Ukraine right now. So it's been very illuminating, and it has really fulfilled my goal of, training and teaching people about better practices.
Yeah, which importantly for all businesses, a lot of them isolate on that one very important P, which is obviously profit. And I love the fact that, it's right there in your bio, is that you focus on the pillars of people, places, and profit. Susan, how do those things fit together? Because a lot of people have their eyes on just that one prize, but I want to hear why those are the pillars that you really focus on.
Well, a year and a half ago, I would have said, I don't know quite how it all melds together, aside from a company telling another company, usually in fashion, a retail customer saying, you must do this or else we won't do business with you, right? But now we can thank the European Union for really bringing a lot of traction to this space with what they call the EU Green Deal. The EU Green Deal encompasses a wide swath of sustainability efforts, from environmental all the way through carbon accounting and measuring an entity's greenhouse gas emissions. And how that is impacting US companies and companies everywhere in the world outside of the EU is that their standards, they have to report on their downstream supply chain, right? So that is what companies are realizing. Even though, quote, this isn't how we do business in this country, end quote, which I've heard that quote, I can't tell you how many times. They are realizing that multinational companies will take them off their vendor matrix, their supplier matrix, if they don't, play the game. And the game is a lot of assessments, so that these companies can then report into the EU Green Deal laws, and some, the alphabet soup, which is Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, CSDDD, lots of acronyms. But yeah, that's how people are realizing, people, planet, profit are interrelated, because I have to do this or else I'm going to lose my customers.
Yeah, for sure. Important stuff. And you're right. I love the fact that we can't ignore it. It is not a choice in many cases. This is the way that the markets are going. And obviously, a lot of it is consumer driven and preference driven. And of course, information driven, which as an educator, I think that is such a core part of what you do and the way that you show up. Talk to us about each of those pillars, because people, talk to us about how sustainability shows up there, places, how it shows up there, and of course, profit. Obviously, we're talking about the business implications of all of this stuff on a business show, but I'd love to hear some of the places that your mind goes when you think about sustainability within each of those pillars.
Yeah, so we at EthoWork, there's an organization called EcoVadis. It's a French ESG sustainability assessment, and we are training partners for EcoVadis. And the way that kind of shows up, the people aspect really in EcoVadis is very much through what they call their labor and human relations theme, or labor and human rights theme. So for any kind of company, small or large, this shows up in, do you have the proper policies in place? Does your handbook really encompass everything that will teach a new employee about their rights at work? So it is really, we may not be calling it human rights, like in, XYZ American company of 300 people, but they are human rights. The right to not be discriminated against, the right to be, paid a fair wage, the right to not be told that they have to work mandatory overtime. These are all basic human rights in the workplace. And we use a lot of the human rights from the International Labor Organization, ILO, as well as here in the States, the Fair Labor Association. Which, a little pitch, I did a learning experience for them recently on human rights. But it really comes down to how, from the policy level for people all the way through your actions. So you can't just say, we have this policy, we have that policy, without them actually being put into place and you being able to show your actions toward that. Whether they be training, whether they be, like in a factory environment, work instructions for safety for people. They show up in different ways in different places and departments and sectors, but that's kind of how people works. I don't know if that was kind of a lot.
Yeah, no, it's great because it gives us so many launching points, because what I think, I'm viewing you right now, Susan, as having your educator hat on, because you made such a clear distinction there, which is having the policies and saying things in a press release is one thing, but implementing it across your people, and the word training keeps popping up, that obviously is so important. We can't just say it, we have to actually do it. What do these training programs look like? Because whether we're training with regards to sustainability or management practices, or whether we're training for any sort of knowledge transfer, it needs to be effective. So with that educator hat on, I'd love to hear some of your insights and your brilliance with regards to how to convey the stuff that we want in a way that it actually works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a lot of it we will do, and I'm going to be real with you, a lot of it is done via e-learning. So that's the instructional designer in me, and making sure that we're creating engaging learning experiences and making sure they're not too long and not too click, and that we're putting good videos in and using every trick of the trade that we can to make sure that people complete the learning and that they enjoy what they've learned, that they retain some of it. And the reason why we scale a lot with e-learning is because it's just that we can scale. We can take a company of 3,000 employees, and like, for example, a construction company, a really large one, and we can roll it out to all of their different locations, and people could even take that e-learning on their phone. So it's a practicality conversation. But in the case of other things like, say, sustainable procurement, which is really a very, it doesn't affect as many people in an organization. We might train them in person or via Zoom in a live kind of, training session and tell them what the process and the steps will be for that particular program that we need to implement within an organization. So we do it both, but I would say, in person as well as, asynchronous e-learning. But I would say the majority is e-learning because we can reach the most people that way.
Yeah, for sure. And it is a universal experience, which I think is so powerful about using the right tools, is that everyone can use it. And especially for me, like, I'm someone who's a visual learner, you can go back. I really appreciate those self-guided formats and mediums. So with that in mind, hearing you talk about these things, it sounds so intentional and strategic. Everything that you're putting into the world obviously has thought and strategy behind it, which is why as a business owner, I always isolate on that one word of plan. When there's a plan or a strategy involved, I think that that's something that sets a roadmap for us, a future looking roadmap. You obviously help your clients develop sustainability plans. Susan, for people who have never done that before, what does a sustainability plan look like?
Oh my gosh, I don't know where to start. It's different for every entity, to be honest. Some companies we work with have a lot put in place already, but they've not formalized it, right? So they may have these policies, they may have really good actions, they may be paying livable wages, they may be, vetting their suppliers in the correct way, they may have good ethics, but maybe it's not put into place. So what we'll do is kind of do a discovery of what they do have, what they don't have, what's material to them. That's a big word in this space, meaning what aspects of people and planet are most material to their business operations, or most relevant is another way. When people say, what does that mean? It means relevance, right? So we'll do a materiality assessment, usually as part of our discovery. And then from there, if they're reaching out to us for specific assessments like Climate Disclosure Project or EcoVadis, or all the things that are right now super hot because it's reporting season this quarter, we'll then, help them along the way with those assessments. It's just a journey, truly. And then from there, after we've, kind of created and built the framework for all of this, we'll develop a comprehensive sustainability plan for them. And sometimes we'll help with them with their marketing department or whomever, put it onto their website, so that they can actually convey their, level of commitment to the space, and make sure that everyone understands what actions they've taken, not just that it's greenwashing and just talk.
Yeah, Susan, I really appreciate how much you emphasize that. It shows up in the way that you're talking to us in today's episode, but it also shows up so much in your work, is that this isn't about saying the things, this is about doing the things. And when I think about doing things, all of us entrepreneurs, all of us business owners, we love, actually, this is probably not just us entrepreneurs, this is just society these days. We're the instant gratification society, and everybody wants things now, but obviously a lot of the work that you do is about planting seeds for the future, and in the way that we're going to see these results and see these changes and transformations, not just today, but long into the future. What's your time horizon when you're engaging with clients, or even when you just internally are thinking about things? Are you viewing these changes and transformations a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What's that time horizon look like?
That is the trickiest question you've asked today, because it depends on what a company is willing to commit to. Sometimes we get called in just for assessment help, Amazon is asking me to complete the EcoVadis assessment. They're demanding this level of score, this level of competency in the assessment. I need your help, and it needs to be done next month. Sometimes we get calls like that, actually more often than you know. And obviously that isn't really ideal. The ideal piece is that you go through the process I explained earlier, where you really kind of do a deep dive, a discovery, internal discovery with the stakeholders at a company to figure out what are their risks, what are their opportunities, what's most relevant to their operations, and how can they move these things forward in a more sustainable and long-term way, not just one assessment. But that being said, those short-term projects often end up turning into longer-term projects for us, because it's almost like there's a shift in their mindset after they've completed something like one of those large assessments that we've guided them through and helped them through. And when they see the success, I've had several CEOs say this entire process was really cumbersome, but it's made us a better company. We're a better company for it, and we want to continue working with you. So we'll come back and we'll help them the next year or within, the next few months, maybe working toward their sustainability plan, maybe working toward specific KPIs that they can put into place and engage their employees. Maybe working on yet another assessment that they need to complete. So it takes different shapes. But I will tell you, I didn't really talk that much about environmental. From an environmental standpoint, there's what we call near-term targets for, like, say, greenhouse gas emissions, and longer-term net zero targets. So depending on the sophistication of the company, we try to work with them to set some kind of a emissions target, as well as water reduction, as well as obviously tied to emissions, energy reduction, as well as, if they're working in, say, timber, or commodities, things of that sort. We'll work with them to figure out how to reduce, or procure the correct items. Plastics, we're working with an apparel company right now where you wouldn't really think microplastics come from apparel, but in the consumer use phase, there's a huge footprint of microplastics going into our water streams and our drinking water, just from washing clothes. So, how do we reduce that? How do we track that? How do we test for that? So there's a lot of different KPIs with different time horizons that can be approached.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, kudos to you for answering a very broad question in a non-lawyer-like fashion. We're also used to those lawyer answers of it depends, but I love the substance that you backed it with. And I really want to call out, it's a word that you just said in that answer. And I'll say, as someone who's researched so much of the awesome work that you're putting into the world, it's a word that shows up a lot in the way that you and Patricia speak about your business, and your marketing language is better. And I think we overlook that word so much in society, but it's such a powerful word. And I think about, I live here in Florida these days, and I think about in Tampa, our mayor has an initiative for 0 bicyclist deaths. That's been a problem in this city. And as someone who's biking, I obviously pay attention to that. And so a lot of people will look at the year-end metrics and say, oh, we didn't have 0 bike deaths. However, if we get better, it's that continual journey. That's another word that you say, of always getting better, being better. I think that's such a powerful approach. And Susan, I feel like part of our thread and theme here today is practicing what you preach. And what I really love about what you and Patricia do is that you don't just say these things for your clients. You don't just help your clients with it. You all live this way in your own business. And right on your website, your about page is not your average about page. There's, of course, about information about each of you, but it also has your vision, your mission, your values, your code of ethics. I love how detailed it is for your code of ethics with your clients, with your services, the way that you charge your fee structure. Please give us some insights into the executive thinking and strategy and intentionality behind how you and Patricia operate, because you are a shining example.
Oh, that's so nice of you to say. I'm so flattered by the executive thought process. I feel like every day we fly by the seat of our pants, as I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs feel. Like, it's like we just have to have a very growth mindset. We have to be constantly adapting to, this came up, oh, that came up, oh, now we're being approached for this service, oh, it's not even one of our products, or, how can we adapt and not just practice. We have to practice what we preach, right? So, this idea of continual or, continuous improvement. How do we keep growing? But I wish I could say we sat down every single week and had strategy meetings. I really wish I could tell you that. I wish I could tell you we had beautiful spreadsheets and, gorgeous KPIs. I wish I could. We make them for our clients, but the fact of the matter is we're often so busy with our own operations, we don't have that space to sit down and just reflect. So I practice what I call 20 seconds of brilliance, which unfortunately usually happens first thing in the morning. I should say unfortunately for my husband, because I wake up thinking. I wake up, like, that's definitely my creative time. And I just write down or even talk into my phone my ideas so I don't lose them. And then my poor business partner, Patty, who is an industrial engineer by trade, who's very methodical and very process oriented and systems oriented. I come up with these, 20 seconds of brilliance. We should do this. We should do that. We should do this. What do you think? And that's kind of what spearheads the way forward oftentimes, along with what the customers are asking for. It is kind of more of design thinking process, I guess you could say, than it is, a very formalized and executive level process. One day, maybe, but not now.
I love those real life insights. I totally relate to that, because here we are talking about informal versus formal executive time. My best executive time is in the shower and on a long bike ride. Those two places is where I do the best thinking. And so I feel like too often in business, we pressure people, sit down for 2 hours a week and do this. If I force it, it's just not going to come. So Susan, it's really awesome to hear those real life insights from you. And yes, your husband probably has heard millions of ideas, but it is cool that you have a business partner that can help you bring those things into reality. So I love the 20 seconds of brilliance. And this is something that I've started asking in these episodes, and it's super broad because everyone has their different way of working. So Susan, I want to ask you this. What's been working really well for you business-wise? Thinking with your business owner hat on, what's something that you look at and you go, wow, we may not have envisioned this, but this is something we've honed in on that's helping us to serve more people, helping us to have a bigger impact in the world?
Yeah. I would say expanding our thought process and our borders past the U.S. has really, really helped us. So understanding, and this is another thing that I do a lot of, I'm just by nature, and it's cliche, but a lifelong learner. And so I go to a lot of webinars, and usually they're hosted outside of the US. And usually they're talking about the new European regulations and all of the trickle down effect that will happen, that we are just now at the tip of the iceberg here in the US. Largely because most people don't think they need to do that here. But again, if you look at the global picture, that global picture is indicating exactly the opposite, that we will. So for anyone who has operations in Europe, anyone who's looking to, create retail structures or distribute information or products, rather, services into Europe, this is really should be on the top of your, just daily kind of agenda, just making sure that you're following the news, making sure that you're following, there's a guy on LinkedIn, Tim Mohin, Mohin. He writes a great sustainability blog. I think he works for Boston Consulting Group, and, their sustainability consulting arm. And I read his report every week, and I click on every link, and it doesn't take me, it sounds tedious, but it doesn't take me that long. It's really great reading. And it's because of Tim that I feel like I'm up to speed on everything that's going on globally in the sustainability space. So I think I'm way off track from the original question, but that's kind of one of the things that's really helped us realize what our opportunities are. And forecast in almost a very creative and non-financial forecasting way, what services we might need to offer.
Yeah, I love that insight. Susan, you were right on topic with that one because, again, I feel like it's advice that we don't talk about often enough within the world of entrepreneurship. And as someone from the outside looking in at your business, it is something that I very much admire, is that it's clear to me from the outside, you have your finger on the pulse. I mean, I even saw, for example, at the end of last year, you all had the ABCs of upcoming California sustainability regulations. Gosh, legally speaking, there's so many things that are always changing. You even given us some oversight in the EU today about how different the EU laws are versus American laws. And so it's really cool to hear how you've been able to do that. And it's intentional. Again, so much of it comes back to always be learning. So I really appreciate those insights. And then this final question. You've been such a wealth of knowledge that good luck to you in finding a great piece of advice for this one. But that is, what is that one takeaway? The one piece of advice that you hope every listener from today's episode gets, knowing that our listeners are at all different stages of their entrepreneurial journey, from big businesses to just starting out as entrepreneurs. What's that one thing you want to leave them with?
You have to be fearless. You really do. You just have to live without fear. You can't, I'm someone who does struggle with some anxiety. And that's one thing that I've just had to let the creative juices and my drive and my commitment to helping people learn more about this space, to helping people become better and improved businesses, to, just in general, spreading the word and making sure people are educated in this space. I have to let all of that overcome my fear. And believe me, there's a lot of layers of anxiety under there. And that's probably the number one piece of advice is don't overanalyze. If you see an opportunity, chase it and move forward with it as fearlessly as possible.
Yes, very great advice. Advice that can't just hit us once, but it's something we need constant reminding of. So I'm so grateful for you bringing that to our audience. Susan, you have been a wealth of knowledge. You are a wealth of knowledge in all the ways that you show up in the world, personally and through your business. So for listeners who want to go deeper into all the great stuff that you and Patricia are doing with your business, as well as all the other stuff that you're involved in, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I welcome anyone to link in with me. I love LinkedIn. I spend time on LinkedIn. I probably should have mentioned that. I do. It's a good networking device for us. And follow EcoWork on our LinkedIn page. We've got a great marketing manager who does all kinds of fun videos, and we have a lot of downloadable, very relevant content like abbreviations and, regulations and things of that sort that we try to make as saleable and bite size as possible for busy professionals. And then, visit our website, ethowork.com. We're certainly happy to help anyone who's found themselves with an assessment they've never heard of, don't want to do, don't have time to do, and, doesn't understand, right? So certainly we're here for small businesses as well as large businesses. In fact, the SME, the small and medium-sized enterprise, is really our sweet spot. So certainly visit us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. We are making it as easy as possible for you to find all of those links that Susan just mentioned down below in the show notes. No matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode, you can find her business website at ethowork.com. You can just click right on through from down below in the show notes, as well as Susan's personal LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out to her, you've heard how approachable she is and how much she genuinely loves this stuff. All of our guests, they are unprepared for the questions I'm going to ask because we know and trust fully that this is their zone of genius. Susan, you so effortlessly talk about the needs, the global trends, the marketplace, looking to the future, the business practices, so many important things. So listeners, definitely check those links out down below. Otherwise, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Brian. I've really enjoyed it.